Hello, can everybody hear me? If I'm trying to see where the questions are, if they are. Okay. I'm not seeing any questions. Okay. Um, okay, so Rohan Notial is saying were Babur's and Aurangzeb's wives not very significant? You know, no, not really. Babur's wife was significant, behind the scenes, and we hear about her. We hear about them because he had several. We hear about the one he preferred, Maham Begum, a little bit. But those times were very turbulent, so there wasn't time for much achievement in that sense. And he died very soon after he conquered Hindustan. And Aurangzeb's wife, no, you are right. We really don't hear. We do not hear about the wives much at all after Shah Jahan. So it was really the daughters who took over and became much more ambitious and who controlled the narrative in a sense. Um, who was the Pacha Begum? Who were the educators of the royal women? There were various women were assigned to be educators. The education was a very serious thing for the Timurids. They valued culture and education greatly, so they always appointed. Sometimes it would be a milk, like for example, sometimes it would be. The Chishti family members were appointed at the time of Akbar because he allied himself, with Salim Chishti. So it depended. It depended a lot on who was influential at that time, but they were very important women, very educated, cultured women, or sometimes Persian women to get into that, to get that influence of the Persian culture as well. So yes, it depended a lot, and there were very many different ones. Kavita Singh asked about, do we know about the status of women in the sultanates? That's not something I've looked at in great depth, so I wouldn't be the best person. Um, how to know about the life? Neha Sharma is asking how to know about the lives of common women in Mughal times. We only hear about royalty. Neha, you're very right. And I say this in my book. I wanted to write about a larger image of women in Mughal times. That was what I set out to do. But to be honest, there's hardly any information. Even for royal women, I had to look very hard to get that information. And sometimes it is the joining of many bits to make a puzzle. So I looked at architecture, I looked at poetry, I looked at little bits of writing somewhere, and sometimes just folk narratives. So it is very difficult even for royal women to be written about. So you can imagine how difficult, even more difficult it is to be able to write about non-royal women. So I wasn't able to do that. It was really very hard, and the lack of primary material is one of the reasons. Rohan asked about the later Mughal royal women. Yes, so you see that after Aurangzeb, it changes a lot. It is no longer the Timurid women. It is different sorts of women who take over. I mean, I haven't studied it because you no longer have that lineage of Timurid women trying to carry on the legacy. So it was of less interest to me. But you often have at that stage non-royal women coming to the fore. For example, some of the Padshahs marry dancing girls, singing girls, and they become important and influential. So that would also be interesting, something to study. But it is no longer that Timurid sort of legacy. Um, Ananya Sekya says, can we state that Mughal state was a processual state and move away from structuralist approach, and the role of women kept evolving from mobile to sedentary? Yeah, it did change a lot. I think you can say that. They were extremely mobile. They continued to be mobile even in the time of Akbar. You know, even though Abul Fazl tried very hard to show that the women were static, they were always traveling with the Pacha. The harem, Harkabai went everywhere with the Pacha. You know, on all his battles, on all his adventures, all his travels, the women always accompanied him. So often the children as well, even when they were very small. They were not sedentary in the sense that we have been made to imagine, and they. But certainly later on, say by the time of Aurangzeb, much less was possible for them than in earlier times. Makfi by Zebun Nissa. So it is difficult. Makfi was a very popular nom de plume. A lot of people, Salima Sultan Begum also used Makfi. It was a popular name, the hidden one. So it is hard to say exactly which lines were written by Zebun Nissa. No, she was not married. The senior Mughal daughters by this time often did not get married, though the junior ones did, because it was a complicated arrangement. They were meant to only marry other Timurid princes. So by this time, because of the very bloody wars of successions, all the brothers, cousins, uncles have been killed. There are very few contenders. And also the Padshahs want to keep these very powerful women close to themselves, close to the court, and not form their own alliances. So the senior women like Jahanara and Roshanara also were not married, though their sisters were. And Zebun Nissa and Zinatun Nissa, I believe, were not married. What role did Harkabai play in reuniting Akbar and Salim? Now, what we hear about in this, the role that women play is more Salima Sultan Begum, who was very respected by the Padshah. She was initially Bairam Khan's wife and widow, and Akbar takes her in after Bairam Khan died, and she's a Timurid woman too, very respected by Akbar, very close to Salim, as all the women were. Actually, they always worked together to protect Salim's cause, and we hear that Salima Sultan Begum was very influential, even more than Hamida Banu Begum, who was also involved. Mughal women, did they keep records and diaries? No, not that I have come across. Diary keeping was not a very common thing in Hindustan. So what we do have from them are things like farmans, orders. Sometimes in their trade dealings we find some things, or we find, as I showed you, the seals on books, so we know what they read. But diaries, not in that sense, except for Gulbadan's book, which is why it is so extraordinary a document. What else? Why were the Mughal royal daughters not offered in marriage and forming alliances like they did in the Deccan? It was, you are right in pointing this out. It was more the other way, that because the Mughals were considered, or they considered themselves the primary family, of the country. So other women of other royal houses were marrying into their family. That was, it was how it functioned. You married a woman, a woman married into a status higher of her own, and the Mughals would very much have thought that nobody else was, eligible for that sort of ranking, if you like, in the hierarchy. There's an interesting question, if I still have time, by Preetham Das, who said, if we compare the contemporary European royal women and Mughal women, who do you think enjoyed more liberty? I think a lot of the writers writing about the Mughal women, the Europeans, seem to be shocked at the influence, if not the physical visibility, which maybe the Europeans had more of, but the power and the wealth that they commanded seemed to be greater here. The Mughal Empire was the greatest in the world at that time, so consequently the women were the most wealthy, so they seemed to command more power. Were women from harem allowed to go for public appearance? Were women from the harem allowed to go for public appearance? How much freedom did they enjoy during Mughal era. So they were not. If you think that they were going in a public way and exhibiting themselves, they did that in the earlier stages. Gulbadan writes about how the women are sitting on the takht with Babur, and to his left and to his right are certain types of women. There are strict hierarchies for the sisters, for the wives, so they are visible. Those women were visible. But as we go down the line, they are not physically visible anymore in this sense, but they were very present. They were always there at important moments. In the darbar, they were behind the lattice, the jali, or in their own tents, and their presence was very much there. Nobody could ignore it. And they took part. They made their feelings known. They once told Akbar that you better come to us because we have something to say to you about this nobleman that you are punishing, and you better come to the harem right now. And he went. So they had a very powerful presence without being physically visible, if you like, in the sense that we mean it. Have you studied the Ottoman women into the Hyderabad royal family? No, I didn't. Are there ancestors of the Mughals in Delhi now? One keeps hearing what sad lives they lead now. Yes, I've heard about that. I'm not sure if they. It's difficult to know. I think my friend Rana Safvi has done some work on that, and she might know, but I don't know about how genuine those claims are. How do we know about Roshnara's many love affairs? We know about these affairs, or rather, we hear about their lurid details from European writings. Again, Roshnara was a very powerful woman, sister of Jahanara, and again, a lot of myth making surrounds her. A lot of bazaar gossip that is picked up by the Europeans, and they don't hesitate, and they don't have to, double check their sources, and they write about it. So we hear about all kinds of escapades that Roshanara is involved in, but I would definitely, take it with a pinch of salt. And also, I find that whenever men obsessively write about a woman's love affair, it is always in a way to try and degrade her, to sort of make her less powerful, to make her only the object of desire and a man's love and obsession. And it is rarely in a way to sort of glorify her. So I try and keep away from that aspect of it. Mr. Hyatt asks, how do you say that Humayun's tomb was built by Begum? Okay, so there are many different sources. Some of them are contradictory, and I would suggest, if you have the time, to read my book Akbar. I have written at length about the question of sources. So I am also not claiming that she built it, because clearly Akbar must have given the money. The money must have come from the Pacha. But I find when I was writing Akbar that Akbar did not seem overwhelmingly attached to Humayun's tomb, to this extraordinary structure. He comes not that often, and scholars have even cast doubt and say, and I forget exactly who, but they say that Abu al-Fazl retrospectively added a few times that Akbar visited Humayun's tomb, that he did not visit it very often at all. So I found that there was not a great deal, if you like, of attachment that Akbar had for this tomb itself, and that Begum did. She lived all her life there. She came back from the Hajj and brought back architects and craftsmen specifically to tend to and finish the construction. So it's difficult to say, was there one person who built it? No, I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say that person was Begum. But putting together all these different bits of information, plus travelers' account who say that his wife is built Humayun's tomb, I would say that she was, let us say, the caretaker of it, and she was the one who was most invested in it. Is any information, Nachiketa Saha asks, is there any information available about the relation between the co-wives in the Mughal harem? That's an interesting question. What I can say from what I've seen is that in important decisions, they often acted en bloc. So whether it was to support one prince like Salim, or support a courtier who was in trouble, Aziz Koka, they always got together and put pressure together on the Pacha or whoever they needed to do that for. So we find a lot of unity in purpose. We find it through these acts that they do. They seem to have this solidarity when it comes to the important moments. We do know a lot from Gulbadan's writing about the co-wives of Babur and Humayun. And from what I can see, there was a great deal of understanding between them. There was an accepted hierarchy of who was senior, who was next, where the sisters came in. It was all very much an accepted part of their society. And there was no, in the sense that we think of it, a lot of backbiting and gossip and always trying to bring each other down. I have not found, any examples of that at all. On the contrary, there was a great deal of solidarity, and it was often there's often a sense of warm companionship, a space where women can be together in an extremely almost enriching way. So it is very different from the idea that we have of a classic zanana or harem. Okay, so I have time for 4 more questions. So Sanaya Kashalkar says, in which memoir do we find the story of Humayun's dream of Sheikh Ahmed Jam? Sanaya, I think it is there in Abu al-Fazl's recording. It is an important one, it ties the Timurids back to this famous Sufi. And if you will... I don't know if you will remember, I don't think I've mentioned it, but the Sufis were a very important part of imperial symbolism, and a lot of rulers associated themselves with various Sufi traditions, with various brotherhoods. In Central Asia, it was the Naqshbandis, and in India, in Hindustan, it was the Chishtis oftentimes. So this was something that would be celebrated, in the Mughal memory. So I believe it is Abu al-Fazl. Title of my book is Daughters of the Sun, and the new one is Akbar, the Great Mughal. Sveta Mola says, why has Jahanara's tomb become a refuge for differently abled women? Yes, I know, I've noticed that, Sveta. I'm not quite sure. Perhaps they have just heard that this powerful woman is buried here, and she has a protective aura of some sort, and having no place to go in the city, they have found one place, a woman's grave. I don't know. Perhaps that's the reason. Maybe one last question that I can answer. The co-wives we have done, the love affairs we have done. I think that may be it. The Pacha Begum, somebody has asked me, I've written up, if you look up the book, I've written exactly who takes over after whom at what stage. So that's easy to see. Okay. I think I've done almost all. I may have, skipped 1 or 2 along the way. So that's it. Thank you for joining me this evening. Thank you for Karwaan. Thank you to Ishan Sharma for being so patient with me and teaching me this new technology. And I hope you've all enjoyed it.